Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant. My permanent guest, Cammy. Welcome back, Cammy.
Hi, thanks, Bryant.
Thanks for being here on this episode of your podcast, where today we're going to talk about invisible men. No invisible women, right, Cammy? What's up with that? Come on. Can you speak for the...
I don't know. I think we'd rather fly.
True. Next episode, flying women. But today's episode, we're going to talk about the concept of the Invisible Man, which was made famous in the book The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, a writing pioneer in horror science fiction. As you know how the show goes, Cammy gives us a story, and then I'll lead a little discussion. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Cammy, lead the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So I used, obviously, The Invisible Man, the book by H.G. Wells. One thing about this, you can get it for free. I'm sure there's other places, but Apple has it for free to read. So
Yeah,
just want to let everybody know that.
No copyright there.
It was a cold night. A blizzard kept the town from moving, but during the standstill, a train did arrive, with a stranger aboard. And soon a man, bundled and freezing, stood at the threshold of the coach and horses, a quaint English inn in the sleepy town of Ipping, West Sussex. He demanded a room and a fire from the owner and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Hall. His body and face were covered with bandages, and he wore an oversized hat and glasses. Once the Halls got him settled, he insisted to not be disturbed, but the mystery surrounding him was too much for the couple. They made any excuse to barge into his room to see what sort of criminal or spy they housed, for he was certainly foreign, American likely from the accent. The mysterious man's only concerns were for his privacy and his property being delivered to the inn, which could not be done in the blizzard. The following day his suitcases arrived, large and heavy. Clinking noises emitted from them as they were brought upstairs, and the man could not have been more delighted to have them. Mr. Hall noted upon delivery that the man was still clad in his overcoat and bandaged to the point that not even a little bit of skin was showing. But as the man reached for his luggage, Mr. Hall could have sworn that part of his arm was invisible. The man quickly shooed Mr. Hall away, saying he must have the utmost privacy to conduct his experiments, for he was an experimental investigator, a very important professional. No one in this small village would understand. He worked for weeks on his experiments, but the Halls became exasperated with the secrecy and lack of payment for the services they were providing him. So they went with the sheriff to confront him. They could find no one in his room, only the beakers and potions that he had concocted. But the room seemed possessed. The bottles moved on their own, and Miss Hall grew more and more panicked, when just then she heard the voice of the stranger. But she could not see him. He spoke to her about his power and invisibility, and with that power came his invincibility. The sheriff tried to grab him, but the man was much stronger, and left him in a battered state. On the run, in the middle of a harsh English winter, the stranger must find shelter. He came upon a house with open windows and helped himself to a fire in the kitchen, when he recognized the owner of the home, Dr. Kemp, an old professor. "Do not be alarmed. You cannot see me, but it is your old friend and pupil, Griffin." Dr. Kemp looked around him for the source of the disembodied voice, but could only see his chair in front of the fire begin to move forward, as though being dragged to a warmer spot. Griffin confessed everything, the way he had for the last few months injured innocence and been thieving to survive. He told the doctor of his plans to take over England and live lavishly on the money he could steal. He begged the doctor to let him stay the night. Dr. Kemp was too frightened to argue. He showed Griffin to the guest room, and when he was sure that the man was settled and he could hear light snoring, he ran downstairs and locked himself in his study to phone the police. When they arrived, Griffin awoke and quickly removed his clothes. He was able to grab a gun from Dr. Kemp's study on his way out and shot at the officers, fatally wounding one of them. Dr. Kemp ran in the direction of Griffin's footsteps in the snow and followed him into town. He tried to restrain him, yelling that he was chasing the invisible man, and the entire town began to run after him as well. They finally cornered him and blindly landed blows on the ground, the street, the wall behind them, and eventually the man. Dr. Kemp tried in vain to restrain the mob, but he could not. Suddenly the stranger began to appear before them, naked and pale, as the life left him.
Oh, damn. Just a mob of people punching the air. What a riot! It's like a mosh pit origin. That's cool. I avoided the story because I had a feeling you'd go directly on that, so I didn't really know too much. That's wild. Yeah, this story sounds really great. H.G. Wells wrote this. Wrote the Time Machine novel as well, and he certainly is regarded as a pioneer of horror science fiction. And I thought it was interesting that it was horror as well, and it really is that suspense thriller, genre. And he really was on top of that. There's
I
a doctor.
rented the movie,
Yeah,
and just so I could finish it, because I read books, like, kind of, try to savor them a
yeah,
little. And the yeah, it was definitely, like, tried to be in that vein of horror. Like, it was almost like an Alfred Hitchcock feel to it. How,
sure, yeah,
there's something after you, you're not, well, obviously you can't see it because it's the Invisible Man or whatever.
yeah, yeah. I wonder. I wonder how it reads. I wouldn't want it to be severely scary. The idea of the Invisible
It's
Man is
not.
scary enough, right? Like I don't want to see someone try, if they adapt it. And that's it. That's so when we talked about doing this, I wanted to see about like finding the concept of the Invisible Man in culture and history and things like that. And what I found was probably the biggest thing is the ring of, and I believe it's pronounced Gyges, or Giges. I can't remember how the Y is pronounced in Greek. Anyway, sorry, but the ring of Gyges, I'll just say Gyges. We'll go with Gyges. The ring of Gyges. It's mentioned by this old philosopher named Plato. I do know how to say that. In Book 2 of the Republic, and of course it is there, and it's basically a philosophical discussion of what you would do if you had the power to become invisible through this ring, the ring of Gyges. And so that it's cool that, like, of course, that the way we discover this is through that. It's not clear if like how this goes. If I'm imagining this existed before Plato, and he just kind of brought it into a philosophical context. That there was a story of a magical ring that can make you turn invisible. Um, uh, King Gyges did live of Lydia as a historical king, talked about by like Herodotus and things like that. Um, there was this golden ring that he pocketed. He discovered by adjusting that ring, he gained the power of visibility. He arranged to become one of the king's messengers as the status of the flocks, arriving at the palace, used his power to seduce the queen. Ooh, and then murder the king and become the king of Lydia himself. So, how does becoming invisible make you seduce? I don't know. It's so weird. There's so much more you can do with your invisibility power, people. I don't know. So, and then in the Republic, it's the character of Glaucon, the brother of Plato. He asks whether a man could be so virtuous that he may resist the temptations of how it would be easy to do all that stuff invisible, being undetected. Glaucon wants Socrates to argue that it is beneficial for us to be just, independent of any consideration for our reputation. So, talking about virtuosity, with the power, Marcus Aurelius would be proud, of course. There was a great quote, though. This is all from Wikipedia. But of necessity, for whenever anyone thinks that he can safely be unjust, there he is unjust. So if you're thinking, I could get away with that, you are unjust. Even just considering that you could do something bad without repercussions, you are being unjust. So I like that. I like that there's a discussion that you could be having in your like basement with smoke in the air. You're like, oh, could I do this if I was invisible? Would you do this? And then these dudes are talking about it too, a few thousand years ago. But so that's kind of the big thing. And of course, looks like Tolkien kind of got from that it's speculated. There's no Tolkien had extensive records, and there's no direct reference that he did take that. But it's cool that Tolkien did. His ring is golden. It does make you invisible in the Lord of the Rings, but it definitely is evil. The more you wear it, the more evil you are, and it exudes that. So I think that kind of helps take the morality out of it, which I think is nice for storytelling purposes. Interesting that John Jacques Rousseau wrote about what he would do if he had the ring of Gyges. He just kind of went on a fan fiction of like, yeah, this is what I do. I don't know what it is. I don't know how. Well, go find that
I
out
love
for
it when people
yourselves.
do that.
Yeah. Like this is like 1782 is when he wrote it, and so he's just like having a time, like just writing out in it. Another old reference coming from the ancients is the cap of Hades, also called the cap of invisibility. It's called the cap of Hades because he owned it. And while the dude gets a bad rap being the head of the underworld, he's a good dude. Lay off Hades a little bit.
This was brought up in Clash of the Titans, the
Oh
80s
yeah,
version. I don't know if it was in the, or maybe late 70s version. I don't know
yeah.
if it was in the other one.
Maybe I can't even remember that. I just remember Liam Neeson.
Yeah, he got remember he got 3 items. I don't remember what. I just remember the cap because it made him invisible. But
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah, and that's so. In classical mythology, the helmet is said to belong to the god of the underworld. It's also called the helmet of Pluto. Erasmus calls it the helmet of Orcus. The helmet becomes proverbial for those who conceal their true nature by a cunning device. The helmet of Pluto, which maketh the politic man go invisible, is secrecy in the council and celerity in the execution. And so it always seems like a lot of the ancient sources kind of tie it to you can't just be invisible. There's got to be some kind of moral implication to just even obtain and think about using it. Like just even thinking about using it is like a challenge, which is pretty wild. So yeah, I thought that was great. It's said that it was made to by the Uranian Cyclops when he gave Zeus the lightning bolt, Poseidon the trident, and then he gave the helmet to Hades in their war against the Titans. So yeah, that's kind of the main, like Roman Greco-Roman stuff. It does kind of show up in a few other things. In invisibility is in a lot of folklore common in Welsh and Germanic lore, just kind of in general. I remember a lot of the stuff wasn't necessarily written down, but it's just kind of there in those word of mouth folk tales. Some scholars speculate that the cap, the Greek, the Greco-Roman cap, could have translated from their cultures into the Welsh Germanic as that culture spread. The mantle of invisibility is described in the tale of Culhwch and Olwen, which is a Welsh one. It's one of King Arthur's most prized possessions. So this was circa the 12th century. The mantle is described again in more detail. I don't want to butcher Welsh, so I'm not going to. Maybe Bredud Rhonabwy, Bredud Rhonabwy, and is later listed as one of the 13 treasures of the island of Britain. So the mantle of visibility, I'm sure Rowling, this might be where she got the invisibility cloak idea in some way. So a similar mantle appears in the second branch of the Mabinogi, which, if you remember, it was like a late written. It was kind of like a compendium of Welsh mythology, but it was like post-Christian, so it's kind of iffy. But it's used by Caswallon. No, that's not how you say that word. I'm so sorry, Welsh listeners. To assassinate the 7 stewards left behind the Bran, the Blessed, and usurp the throne. So, Welsh mythology kind of made this big resurgence, especially in like Brittany and in France. The King Arthur legends, those kind of things came up during this period when people were sharing these wonderful stories. And a mantle of invisibility would be a perfect plot device for any French nobleman. You know what I'm saying? So very cool. In the English fairy tale, which I didn't realize this was English, Jack the Giant Killer, the hero is rewarded with several magical gifts from the giant, including a coat of invisibility, and another, the Tale of Tom Thumb, from Norse mythology, and other more Celtic. Yeah, they mentioned the Mabinogian again. So there are some coats, mantles, and things like that. And then also in Japan, they have the Kakure Mino, the magical straw cape or raincoat of invisibility, which there's a really cool folktale called the Peach Boy, Momotaro. And that's one of the treasures he gets from slaying an ogre, which is super parallel to the mini thing of Jack the Giant Slayer, which I knew that was like a movie and thing, but that's definitely a future episode, Jack the Giant Slayer or Giant Killer. Definitely something worth talking about. I didn't realize it was an old English story. Totally makes sense. But yeah, I think this is really cool. The Momotaro one, by the way, it's so cute. I like this little boy who's like born from a peach. Makes me think of Jack and the Giant Peach,
Sure.
which I barely remember, but yeah, he just like cute little boy. Like there's a little like wood block almost, or classical painting. This is from like the 12th century in Japan. So we have evidence that it was a word of mouth story in the 12th century. So it looks like the Greco-Roman, that's where we get the oldest references to it. Mainly came up through philosophical debate, but it definitely was there. I couldn't. It's a kind of tricky to see. I don't know if any of the kind of unusual sources, South Asian mythology, African mythology. I didn't see anything directly referencing that. So if you are aware of something, please let us know. I would really like to hear others. It was really refreshing to see it being mentioned so much in Celtic and Welsh mythology. I didn't realize it was connected to King Arthur like that, but again, kind of makes sense. And it said Germanic, but I'm guessing there was no specific story referenced. I'm just guessing in general that Western, Anglo sphere, it just kind of became a story of that became famous enough to stick around the way it did. So, but yeah, and then this dude H.G. Wells in 1897 brings out this book, and it seems like it's a great story. It has a couple of successful films, kind of. Very famous. Just before I finish, just to talk about the story real fast. At this time, this is the time of Sherlock Holmes,
Sure.
Conan Doyle, and stuff like that. Children's literature was very prominent, and Dr. John Sutherland, a British literary critic, he talks about the contemporaries like Doyle and Rudyard Kipling and H.G. Wells. They were essentially kind of writing like children's books for grown-ups. That's what these were. They were just a suspenseful hook, very easy to read, but really captivating, really fun. And this book really, especially, I didn't realize. We need to talk to our friend from What a Goal Wants, if she's seen, but a griffin has become an extremely iconic, the main character of the Invisible Man, an extremely iconic character in horror fiction. So this story, this tale really did a big number, and I think it's probably influenced directly and indirectly hundreds and hundreds of tales and stories, whether they're directly about invisibility or not. But it's really cool to see. My last note: Russian writer Yakov Perelman, in the 1960s, has a book, Physics Can Be Fun, and he talked about the science behind it. It was really cool. Basically, he's saying that the method would have blinded Griffin, essentially, like not worked the way he did. But it's cool to see that he kind of tried. But yeah, Mr. Perelman had to shoot that fun balloon out of the sky. So, Cammy, thank you for that story. That was a great little way. Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can get the whole entire book. I'm sure. What's the source that we use for the free books all the time? Oh my gosh, what is that huge website that has millions of
the Google Books one?
There, you can just Google it and get it.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, and we should put it in the show notes
gosh.
because I do
We
not
will.
remember. I know exactly
It's
what you're talking
going
about.
over my head.
Gutenberg, right?
Gutenberg Project. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank God. I was like, this is gonna be horrible if we can't remember it. I'm gonna be like, free books, maybe German. No. Yeah, the Gutenberg.org, I believe they have tons of books in great formats, and I'm sure that this is on there. But yeah, you should be able to just download it straight from like Google Play Store, Apple Store, and all that. Cammy, thank you again for everything. Everyone, let us know what you think as we continue into January. If you got any episode suggestions, let us know. Mythstorie with an IE at gmail.com. Click our mythstorie.net website for all of our links to support us. I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, stay visible, and we will see you next time.
Oh. Where did that wolf go?